Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and as always, I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And again, we had a really lively pregame, and I got to mention this, Jim, that for the last four, maybe five episodes in a row, I've said something to you when we said hello before we hit record, and you've said something along the lines of, I can't believe this, Mark, but once again, we're thinking and talking about similar things as if we were talking before the call. It was like, I think that means we're talking about the right stuff. It could mean something else, and maybe that's for another episode, but I brought to Jim's attention the fact that I just had a conversation with my grandson's grandparents based on a discussion I had with my son, his father, about him struggling in school a little bit. As it turns out, the initial kind of assessment, although there's been no conclusive prognosis as of yet, that there might be some neurodivergence stuff going around, and the acronyms of ADHD and the word dyslexia have come up. And I say nothing is definitive, but as anyone who might be listening knows, Jim is dyslexic, and I grew up with a good friend who was dyslexic, and I do believe my older brother was an ADHD poster child before anybody knew what that was. So this topic of neurodivergence, and then you could bring Elon Musk into this discussion. You could bring a lot of people into it, and Jim's got some very interesting stories, some of which I've heard and some of which I've not. So I'm really excited about that. But I feel, Jim, like I'm the outsider looking in on this, and you're the insider looking out on it. And I think that might be a very interesting conversation. So, yeah, you and I talked. You gave me some really good thoughts for my grandson about labeling and avoiding that temptation. And then the other thought was about don't make sure you don't allow him to use that as a crutch, because some kids that are given that label now think to themselves, either internally or in their group, well, I don't have to do the work that these other people do because I'm at this disadvantage. And I thought those were great pieces of advice. I don't know that I articulated them well. But Jim, over to you. I don't know if you want to start with your own story or maybe just comment on some of our observations.
Yeah, like you said, is it a coincidence or we're serendipity, whatever you call it? But the last few episodes, I think were good because we were already thinking along the same line. So there's something to say for the universe maybe aligns. But yeah,
Yeah.
this is definitely a topic and something that's personal. But first of all, about your grandson, my advice was, yeah, that fortunately he'll be fine because he has loving grandparents and a father that cares about him. But most importantly, not allow the school district and others, particularly teachers, label him as he has a disability. I feel very strongly that we need to reframe that. It's not a disability; it is a ability to learn differently,
Hmm.
and it's a cognitive thing, and the brain doesn't function the same for everybody. So by putting labels on it means that they can find a drug to put them on drugs, and I think you've already made that decision not to allow that to happen. That would be my one. Uh,
Yeah, that's my vote. It's not entirely my decision, but it's certainly my vote, and I'm getting feedback that everyone feels the way I
yeah.
do. So that's
Yeah,
comforting.
of course, and it's not doesn't mean I'm not opposed to some treatments, and that may involve that at a certain point, but certainly not right away and too young. That down the road, that these medications can really help, but that should be the last alternative, right? It's really as he different, but so yeah, again, the timeliness is really good because over the weekend, uh, I'm I was in Chicago and my son's fiance just graduated. She got her doctorate degree. So nice ceremony and met her two brothers, just great guys, really. So she's one of three, and her oldest brother, and she had mentioned something about him being on the spectrum or something, but what a wonderful human being. I
Hmm.
just thoroughly enjoyed spending time with him. And you wouldn't really know he's neurodiverse, but obviously, he struggles to the point where he doesn't live alone and he he has some assistance, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But what I
Mm-hmm.
what I what I want to talk about is this mind, this neurodivergent mind, and how it's special. It's such an important part of everything. You mentioned Elon Musk. It's an important part of human evolution, and now finally we're going to start to tap into these superpowers that they have. But
Let Jim, let me read what you sent me. If it sounds like it might be a good
Sure, yeah, I
opportunity.
think it sets the stage well because it gives us a foundational language in relationship. How do we refer to these people that are different? Because there's a number of different labels, like you said, dyslexic, all these different things, ADHD. It doesn't matter. You're just your brain is processing information differently. So yeah, please.
I think the notion of being on quote unquote the spectrum
Yeah,
is kind of a generous way to look at it, because you can't really put anybody in one particular category.
that's
Those are
right.
great. Those are degrees of neurodivergence. They're not good, bad, or indifferent. They're just degrees of different ways of thinking. And I
Hmm.
love that recontextualization. I think that's really important. But
Yeah.
what you sent me, just like we do with words, is just read a definition. And this might not be an exact definition, but I think it'll give us some talking points.
Hmm.
Most common signs of neurodivergence: difficulty with written communication, processing sensory information, issues with focus and concentration, intense interest in a particular topic or activity, stuck in repetitive behaviors or routines, difficulty following instructions, and difficulty organizing thoughts. That sounds like a teenager to me.
Well, yeah, and again, it's maybe difficult. It often what that brain is doing, it does deep dives, right? It hyper focuses on one thing to the point where that's all it can see and do, and then it may
Mm-hmm.
be difficult to do the most basic things like brush your teeth or um, you miss appointments, things like that. But it doesn't mean that that mind isn't doing something valuable to the world. So that's what I'm trying to reframe it, because it does have some advantage. We'd mentioned Elon Musk, right? You can people can criticize him for maybe what he's doing now, which I don't really understand, but he clearly is one of the greatest humans. He's a genius, like we've never seen in modern time, next to
You
Einstein,
know,
maybe.
I told you, and we don't have to get into the details, but I saw him being interviewed yesterday. I'm not sure if it was an older interview, but he was,
Mhm.
and the interviewer asked him, "Why do you want to go to Mars?" And and everyone kind of thinks, well, we want to stick a flag up there. We want to say we could do it. And he's like, no, 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 no. In millions of years, the sun's going to burn the earth, and we need someplace else to live. And I'm beginning the process of making that not just a place to visit, but a place to have sustainable life. And he went on into detail about that. And I'm thinking to myself, most people can't even fathom what he's talking about,
Mhm.
right? Like his imagination is so vast,
Yeah.
is so creative. How could you not look at a guy like, how could I not look at a guy like that and go, this guy thinks way different than I do, and that's attractive to me. That's like interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's run with that, Mark. Here's another person that's very notable. When I mention his name, I'm sure many of our listeners will recognize his name. That recently went through the protocol and being diagnosed as having ADHD, and that's Dan Sullivan with Strategic Coach. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is in recent years, by the way, because he went through the Amen protocol, which is something I had considered before I met you,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's interesting because he did, what is he, 70 something years old, and he goes through this. So
Mm-hmm.
I listened to his podcast this morning, the Strategic Coach, and he interviewed one of his clients, he, and it was fascinating to hear how this ADHD neurodivergent client of his, which is an engineer, now has a whole other podcast. He has a whole program for business owners with ADHD, and
Mm.
um, and it fits very well with Dan Sullivan's framework of his unique ability. Have you ever read a Dan Sullivan's book? Because
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a classic, right? Anybody that knows Dan Sullivan knows what unique abilities mean. And so now this guy, his name's Andre Bison, I think Brisson, and he starts a program to help people with ADHD get really clear on what they do well, and then get rid of everything else and focus
Mm-hmm.
on unique abilities, which is Dan Sullivan's framework, for the last 30 years, right? Focus on what you're good at, not what you're not, and then the
Yeah.
results. So you'll
Well,
love this, Mark. One of his number one recommendations, or let's just say language that he used about his program and how much this has helped him, was self-awareness and self expectance, being very self-aware of this. That took him a lot of years to develop that, and be accepting to himself.
mm-hmm. Self-acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
when
I
I
think
heard
that,
that, it made him think about our podcast, which is
well,
about
I mean,
self-awareness,
it
right?
really, I mean, to me, I don't know if this is glib or not, but to me, it's like self-awareness is self-awareness. I think that we all have, we can all benefit from it. It's a very, very, very powerful thing to be able to do. What you're self-aware of is unique to you,
That's right.
right?
That's why
Being
it's why it's
self-aware,
self-expectancy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being self, it's like, to me, it's like, well, I like exercise. You like exercise, but you might want to ride a bike where I might want to go jogging. It's still
Mm-hmm.
exercise, but I'm
Yeah.
doing it what's unique to me because that
Mm-hmm.
suits me and that's sustainable for
Mm-hmm.
me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yep.
it's very similar. And dude, I gotta hammer this point you made earlier home because and we can come back to it, but this labeling thing, and we
Mm-hmm.
do it with it's a group think type of thing. Putting a label on somebody, you're putting them into a group, right? And it's like, well, don't do that. And then even better than that, in the context of my grandson, was try to figure out how not to allow this kid to go, well, I have an excuse now.
Yeah.
And you said that better than I did, but I love that point. It was a great piece of advice.
Well, it's an excuse, but it also creates this victim mentality that will not serve him well.
Yep.
Anytime you, so if all the teachers and everybody convince him that he has this label, and then he's been a victim to this disease or whatever they call it, however they want to label it, because it's a defect, then now all of a sudden he becomes a victim. And that's when you become a victim, you've given your power to somebody else,
Yep.
and that
Yep.
would be the school district or this system that he's in.
Well, I
Again,
think that, and that's a completely valid point. And I'm kind of chuckling about what my mind is doing to me right now, and thinking, I don't think he's as likely to play the victim as he is to say, I can manipulate people with this.
you're right, Mark. Kids are clever, right? He'll
Yeah.
get very clever of how he can get out of doing homework
Yeah.
and all these different things. So,
Yeah.
and that's so here's another thing that came out of this podcast interview with Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, was a value statement, right? That conversation you have with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the value that you have to the world, right? Your self value, super important. These are his recommendations, and
Mm-hmm.
then the one, and that'll kind of set up the next discussion we'll have about creating a vocabulary to better communicate to the world, because as neurodiversity, you're in the fight or flight mode often, right? You want to
Mm-hmm.
fight or flight. So there's confrontational. That's why I used to get in a lot of fights. That's why the 80% of the prison population has some kind of neurodiversity,
That's
because
interesting.
they get frustrated and they get violent, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's our mode, and that was most of my life. Fortunately, with a good family and sports and other things, I was able to avoid the worst case scenario, which is prison or dead, and came very close to it many times, right? And that's why what I do today, a lot of it is trying to help young men that are struggling with those kind of things, give them inspire them, give them hope to not give up, because at the end of the
Isn't
day,
yeah.
it is all about just showing up, and that starts with a mentality that I was fortunate enough to be around.
Yeah,
Growing up.
well, and it's interesting to me because not being, at least as far as I know, neurodiverse, I still am in line with you with regard to, the choices that we can make, independent of what our hardships might be, our limitations might be, whatever our unique capabilities or challenges might be, because we all have them, and it's not a contest as to who has more than the next person.
Mhm.
But I think the choice to me is, can I continue to try and figure this out so I can maybe even make it work to my advantage? Or am I going to whine about it for the rest of my life and never seek any kind of resolution and just accept this mediocre life?
Mhm.
And I don't mean to belittle neurodivergence at all, but I think what I just described is a challenge that faces all of us. It's a choice that faces all of us.
It does. This applies to everything, right? Not just that. The other thing I've seen happen in recent years is they make them, there's something wrong with them, and then he has no confidence, right? He or
Mm-hmm.
she, they just beat the confidence out of him. The other thing I'm starting to see, which is just as dangerous, is they make them like they're extra special,
Yeah.
and they're not that extra special, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be careful of both extremes. And this
Yeah.
is just what school districts do. They're really good at,
Yeah, no, well, it's when you put someone in a box, it's easier to control them, and it's
yeah.
less work to keep track and to motivate. I'm interested in your opinion on this because when one of the things we first started talking about, and if you want to go in a different direction, that's fine too. But
Mhm.
my good friend growing up was dyslexic, and that was before anybody knew what dyslexic was, much like yourself. And everyone told him he was stupid,
Mhm.
and that manifested itself in a lot of different ways. But one of them was he got in a lot of fights. He actually, in high school, I believe he led his hockey team and his football team in penalty minutes 3 years in a row.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
he was good. He
yeah,
was good.
yeah.
And then my older brother, who I believe was a poster child for ADHD, but was never diagnosed because nobody even knew that acronym back then, he turned that apparent inability to stay focused and stay put. He fought a lot too. He played a lot of sports, and he ended up a black belt in Taekwondo and a fighter pilot. So obviously, you can channel these things for good.
Sure,
But
sure. And they've been
what
around
was
forever.
your
So it's not like it's anything new, right?
no?
People have been dealing with this for as long as there've been humans. If you look at
Yeah.
some of the greatest, again, innovators, they all had this. So this is
Yes.
nothing new. But yeah, again, if you want to get into labels, in recent years, I think I told you, I had some testing done. I'm actually more dysgraphia is really what I have, and that's a cognitive function. It's a real thing. It's very, very difficult to write
Mm-hmm.
because my brain is processing on average about 1,200 images per second. The average person is about 300. So
Oh.
things are moving very, very, very fast, and I'm trying to constantly look for frameworks and concepts. I think in concepts,
Mm-hmm.
and so again, when you're doing certain things, it's very, very like problem solving and 3D, three-dimensional thinking, because you're seeing that could be good, but a basic function like writing something is very, very difficult to this day.
Yep. Yep.
Although I have to say, with AI, and this came out in this podcast this morning, this is such a game changer for people with the artificial intelligence and how that can help people like myself and others. This is
Well,
going to
I was actually talking to my grandson's grandfather this morning about this. I was prompted to call him by a conversation I had with my son a couple of days ago after I was allowed myself to digest it, because I wasn't considering it a problem. I was just considering it a conversation that as a grandpa I should probably have, and maybe I can be helpful, maybe I can't, but I don't think I can be harmful. And it was interesting in approaching it, and I was interested. Because he's my grandson. I was interested in your experience as a young boy, and in your opinion on. And if you don't want to share that story, you don't have to.
no,
But
no, I'd be happy to share it. In
okay,
fact,
and then even more importantly, maybe is have you in your opinion have you resolved that satisfactorily, or is that a lifetime journey for you?
yeah, wow, Mark, like I said, the question is so timely. I'll answer I'll give you a short answer, and then I'll kind of give you the long answer as far as
Okay.
my journey of it. But because like I mentioned, I'm doing a kind of a rebranding of a personal brand, and one of the exercises to get really clear on, your unique abilities, and those unique
Mm-hmm.
abilities, for the first time, are related to this mind that I have that can solve problems very quickly, especially business problems, technology. I'm doing an AI platform. All my patents are related. So for the first time, I'm really bracing this on. Instead of trying to hide it and being embarrassed about it, being
Mm-hmm.
shameful, I'm gonna lead with it. I'm not 100% comfortable with it yet, but I'm starting to be, and that's why the timeliness is. So, but yeah, I'll start off with some stories, and then I'll really start off with the word fortitude, because that's what you'll get. Fortitude, right? The ability to push through things that, if you don't have something like this, you develop a tremendous amount of fortitude, and that can be applied to everything in life. But yes, it starts with the mentality. When I remember you said your son is 9 at the moment.
Grandson, yeah, 9.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is, if I break down life in my 5-year increments, right? 5, 10, 15, 20. I think I was around his age, maybe a little bit younger. I remember like it was yesterday, but my dad, um, was asking me to rake up some leaves or something. I don't know. That's what we did on the weekends. We'd go to the yard work, and then we'd go to the. I had 4 brothers and sisters, so there's 4 of us. So the only time you spend with your dad was going to the dumps. That was about.
I remember that. I
Yeah.
did that too.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So I
Yep.
was raking or something. I was young, really young, and he said, "What's going on?" I said, "I can't do this." And man, my dad wasn't a very emotional guy. He didn't say much, but he got so mad and just yelled at me and said, "I never ever want to hear you say the word I can't." So right from, again, a young age, I'm talking like 5 to 10 years old, that word I can't was impounded into my mind, as in, like, okay, I can't. So to back to mentality, right? If you don't have that mentality, that we're can, so then not knowing later on, I would use that, the rest of my life. So that was the kind of the first time, and then the second one was, I was, yeah, maybe closer to your grandson's age. I think it was like 5th or 6th grade. So I was, in the classroom, and in those days, everybody would take turns reading. Right, you'd read a book, and everybody go through. So they're going through the classroom. I remember like it was yesterday. It was, super hot day, so all the windows were open, and my turn came, and I'm reading, or I start to try to read, and I remember getting nervous. I was getting super scared, hoping that the bell would ring because it was recess,
Yep.
and my turn comes, and I'm trying to read this book, and the words are jumping around. I can't, and the teacher is, yelling at me in front of the class, like, "You're not trying hard enough. You're," and the whole class starts laughing. So I have to tell you, I said, I get emotional to this day talking about it, how,
I bet. I bet. That's crushing.
oh, just soul crushing. Like,
Yeah.
and I just remember her mean, ugly face saying, "You're not trying hard enough. Try harder." And I'm thinking, I'm a kid, right? I'm like, I'm trying. It just ain't. It's not. The words aren't coming out, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I remember the bell rings, and it was whew, just like the relief, like this bell from heaven,
Yeah.
and then it's recess. And that, in those days, we played Smear the Queer, if you know what that
Yeah.
means.
Yep.
So, man, did I destroy those kids? I mean,
Yeah.
I destroyed every one of those kids. I've heard them. I made every one of them cry, and that's my aggressiveness, right? I was a big kid. I grew, at 12 years old, I was already through puberty, right? So I was much bigger, um, than a lot of the other kids.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was my first story, that, of just the physicalness of that, how good it felt to those kids that were laughing, that I
Let
got
it
to
out.
punish them. Yep.
Yep.
That I
Yep.
punished them. Boy, did I. So that was kind of the first time. And then, I think you've heard the story before. The second time was, it was also that, back to that mentality, right? Just not to quit.
Right.
There had been a couple other incidences where, um, but this, life goes on. I get into, yeah, I go to junior high school, school's really hard, but I get elevated to, with captain or, I always get elevated. So if they're like a sixth grade team, I play on the seventh grade team, that kind of
Sports.
thing. Sports. Yeah.
Yep.
Sports. Clearly I excelled in that. So
Yep.
I was getting moved up, but, when I was in the locker room, I was 15 years old and I got moved up to varsity, like third string, somehow worked my way to get to first string as a 15-year-old in the locker room. And I'll never forget, uh, I'm in the locker room. This is before like our first, it was halftime during our second preseason game. And they had won the league championship the year before. And this, superhuman guy walks into the locker room. Of course, he's the captain of the team, right? Um, and he yells, "Nobody runs on Hayward. Nobody, nobody runs on Hayward." And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but we'll see, right? And
Yeah.
and so I remember getting out there and I make the play. We stop them. We win. We went on that year to win the league championship. Had still a league record with only 100 yards rushing. We lost in the playoffs, but that was Jack Del Rio. He went
Yeah.
on to become obviously an All-American in three sports, MVP for the Rose Bowl, and then 10-year NFL coach, I think all pro, and then of
Yeah.
course a
Yeah.
coach. So,
Yeah. A
so
badass.
yeah, but talk about a mindset, right? And then a
Yeah.
mentality that you just take on to everything. And then the last story was, a few years later, I graduated from high school. I was trying to graduate, just about ready to graduate. I got into a head-on collision. My friend was driving. He hit a head. Drunk driver hit us head on. No safety belts. Uh, Basically stuck my head through the windshield. You see the 60 scars I had above my left eye. Left eye.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I had like a 17 and a half inch neck because I was playing football and didn't break my neck. But that was one of those moments where you're at a low point where you're and I just remember that mentality. I remember looking at that windshield. But a few years later, I was trying to play football in college, and because of my head injuries, the concussions, it was too difficult to concentrate. Among the dyslexia, I'm sure that didn't help with it either. But I was going to night school, and because my father made it real clear, if not to pay rent, you had to stay in school. And since I dropped out of junior college because of my head injury, um, I was trying to take night classes, so I didn't have to pay rent. And I was in the classroom working all day as a cabinet maker, taking BART from San Francisco to Hayward. And I was in an English 101 class. Again, I can remember like it was yesterday. The teacher walks up to me at the end of class and says, "Hey, Jim, I need to speak to you after class." And of course, there's nothing, it's not like I got anything wrong because it's junior college night class. And she says to me, "Hey, Jim, I've got some news for you. We just got your test results back from the last test, and I'm going to ask you not to come back to class." And I go, "Why?" She says, "Well, I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, but you have a third grade reading level and writing level. So, you know, you you just don't belong in this class."
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember going, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" That's what I
Yeah.
came here, right? Like, what am I supposed? It was 18 years old,
Yeah.
and I went back. I remember walking back to my truck, which was in the parking lot. Sat there for like 4 hours, of course, full of sawdust, with um, tears burning my eyes from the sawdust on my face, and just thinking, I am so fucked
Yeah.
at that point. And then uh, and also my other really good friend was playing baseball for Arizona State, and he had just won the Carl's World Series. He was the MVP, of course, on his way to have his professional career. And then Jack, of course, was Don Wakamatsu, and then Jack was my other friend that just won the Rose Bowl. And here I am comparing myself, like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am. So that was that low point in life where I'm comparing myself to them. They're a couple years older than me, so uh, wasn't exactly the same. And then I just remember saying, nobody runs on Hayward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
that, it really was that mentality. And then it was that mindset that said, I got to figure this out. And then I started, I, it's right. I bought some cassette tapes and started teaching myself how to talk, because I was only speaking slang because my
Mhm.
I never learned how to read or write because I just did everything off memory, right?
Yep. 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 You made the
So
adjustments. Yep.
yeah, with cassette tapes taken Bart, I could listen to things and then get the explanation of words, and that was my first exposure to audio tapes and audio books, and then the
Hmm.
rest is, you know, kind of history as far as being autodidactic, right?
Yep.
Self learner, self taught. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it must have been dad in your brain as well with the I can't stuff too, right? You cut he
it's a
no such.
combination of that, yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, and yeah, and then obviously a little bit of luck and, you know, supporting yourself with the right people, and you know, it all worked out okay. But yeah, so when you asked about your grandson, it's personal. It's very personal
Yeah,
too.
no, I really appreciate you sharing that. I know that we're kind of bumping up against it, but I think that this is a topic that we could talk about multiple different times
Yeah.
and run with a lot of different places. I think that I really want to kind of conclude, if I may, with, and you go, I'll pass it back to you, but these lessons for my grandson, this, don't don't allow him to be labeled. And as I would recommend, perhaps don't allow anybody to be labeled,
Hmm.
and don't allow him to use this to play the victim, and that thing I alluded to earlier, or allow him to manipulate the fact that he's special in some capacity, because none of us are special in that regard. We're all special in our own regard. But I think this neurodiversity thing, from my perspective, from a non-neurodiverse person, um, it needs a lot more attention. I think it's dangerous if we continue to throw medication at it, particularly at a young age. But I think there's a lot of knowledge that we are yet to have about it. And I would really hope, with people like Musk and like you and other people that are consciously aware of this now and have stories to tell of overcoming this, that it's not a death sentence by any means. It actually could be the exact opposite of that. I'm not, I said this a couple times too, I'm not kissing your ass by telling you that's overcoming some serious shit, dude.
Hmm.
So, good for you. But I think
Yeah.
fortitude, one of my favorite words,
Hmm.
victimhood, one of my least favorite words.
Yeah. 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 No, like I said, he's lucky to have a loving grandfather and a supporting system. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not what happens to you; it's how you respond to what happens to you, right?
Oh, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. And amor fati, you know, right? It's not, things happen for you, not to you. And 90% of life is showing up. Teach them how to show up. You see, you got
Yeah.
to show up. You got to show up when it's hard. You got
Yep.
to show up and show up all the time, and show up with a good attitude. You'll be fine. But
Well, and I appreciate that.
make sure that he makes this is that grit, that one thing that he's not going to let uh, stop him. He can turn
Stop
it
him,
into
get in his way.
his
Yeah.
superpower. Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you for sharing all that stuff.
All right.
I could see the emotion rising
Yeah.
up
Sorry
in you,
about
like
that.
you. But no, 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 no. That just makes it
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. It was very, very generous of you, and hopefully, some other grandfather out there might benefit from having a grandchild that now he might be able to take a slightly different approach with. But thanks
All right.
again, Jim. That
All
was
right, man.
great.
Talk to you next week.
See ya.